Hi, welcome. This is our second part of search engine optimization or SEO. So if you remember our last video, we were talking about keyword searches, right? And in particular, we really want to take a very proactive approach when it comes down to keywords. So instead of just assuming that our website is using the right keywords, what we're going to do is we're going to try to do some research on what kind of keywords we could be considering beyond what we're doing already. Now, to do this, a very systematic approach maybe will be to look at a 2 or 3 step approach. And first, you can do some brainstorming internally within the firm, right? And when you do this, try to remove some of your preconceptions. You are an expert in your industry, right? And you know all about your brand. So try to pretend for a moment that you don't. Let's assume that you're somebody who's not familiar with your brand, right? How would they go about searching for a company that has similar products or services as the one that you're managing, right? What kind of search queries are they going to use when they go to Google or any other search engine, right? They probably are not going to be typing in your brand, right? Unless you're a staple brand that everybody knows about, like Coca-Cola, right? Chances are that the people that are not familiar with your brand, they're not going to be using your name, right? So what kind of other searches are to be expected by somebody who's maybe not an expert when it comes down to your product category? And when you're doing this, expand your horizons a little bit. Instead of wording something only in one way, think about a couple of variations, right? One of the variations will be using synonyms instead of using a particular word. So instead of the word car, can you use the word vehicle or the word automobile, right? So in different regions, some of these words are going to be maybe more likely than others. But regardless, you want to expand your keywords beyond the ones that are maybe the most commonly used ones. Because as we're going to see later, it's not just the number of times that a keyword is going to be shown, but also how competitive that space is if you end up deciding to do some search engine marketing like we're going to discuss later in this class, right? Good. After you do this brainstorming, for which, by the way, I strongly encourage you find a friend or somebody else in the firm to help you, because 2 brains are definitely better than 1 when it comes down to exhaustive keyword lists, right? And you might want to gather some data. Now, if you have the funds or resources, you might want to survey your actual or potential customers, right? Ideally, you'll get a little bit of both, but probably asking actual customers is going to be easier. If you have followers in a social media platform like Facebook, right, you could do a quick poll or something like that. When I say Facebook, YouTube, whatever social platform you're in that enables you to interact with the users, you might want to use to gather some, let's say, informal data. And by informal, I mean that maybe it's not necessarily representative of all target market, but it will be a start. And ask them about how they found you, what kind of queries do they do when they actually go to Google and they are looking for a company similar to yours, right? You can ask, or you can look at empirical data that you already are generating via your servers, right? So if you have a website, that website is hosted somewhere, and every time that somebody clicks on a link that goes to your website, there is going to be code underlying that landing in your page by this user that is going to tell the server what where that user came from. What was the referring page, essentially? Is it a referral or not? Or did it come directly from a search engine? This is something that the person that is in charge of the server can gather this information. One way of getting to this information, if you're not an IT person, is if you have control of your site, like maybe some of the marketing aspects are associated with your site, you might be able to use Google Analytics to find this information. In fact, if you do a little digging through Google Analytics, you'll be able to reach a page or table similar to the one that I'm showing you here. What you can see here is for this particular website, what different websites are referring the content. And you can see the number of times that somebody came from this particular website, etc., etc. So you can see, for example, by looking at the last one, that from Coursera.org, which is a website that has massive online university classes, you got 124 people that actually came to your website within the time frame that this data was actually collected, right? So not only you can get this information, but you can actually see what kind of key searches, if any, they use to get to your site. So you can find in the referral logs where people came from and also what searches they did. And you might want to seriously include some of those keywords that they are already using to find you into your list of keywords that you should use to build your website. Now, other than brainstorming and using referral logs, you can also use third-party keyword planners, right? These are typically web-based applications that enable you to do some research on what kind of output you should expect from different keywords, given, for example, the website that you have to start with. And maybe some of these tools, they will enable you to have some filters that enable you to do some targeting as well. And a couple of examples of apps that you should consider. One will be Google Ads. So if you're in the Google platform, that will make a lot of sense for you to use. Now, I want to warn you that while it's free, most of the more interesting content requires you to actually do a campaign that it's a paying campaign. So some of this information you're going to be able to access. Some of the information maybe it's behind a paywall. And this is true for most tools, by the way. So there is a little bit of information you can get for free, but if you want to get into the more interesting stuff, let's say, you might have to pay for it. Now, Google Ads in particular does have a suggestion of keyword engine that is free, at least for basic searches, right? So you can see an example right here where I did a quick search for Randolph-Macon College and I use a particular query and I requested that Google Ads give me suggestions of other keywords that I could be considering when it comes down to this website and this particular query. Right? So it's using variations that may actually yield similar results, but in some cases, maybe they might be either cheaper to use or they might have better click-through rates, which means that more people are going to go into your website if you actually use these keywords as opposed to the ones that I was originally using. Right? And it's not only Google Ads, there are many other providers that have this kind of SEM tools. We'll talk about SEM at a later date in this class, but just as an example, so that you see it's not only about Google, here you have another tool that you can use. It's called SEMrush. It's also free so long as you don't want suggestions. So if you want to see just how difficult, for example, will be to get some of these keywords if you decide to do some paid search, which we haven't talked about much yet because we're only talking about SEO so far. You could use this tool to actually see some characteristic about those different keyword searches. And the nice thing is, so long as you don't want suggestions, and this tool is actually free. If you want the suggestions, you need to pay for the tool. So as you can see, some of the tools are going to give you some information for free. Others are going to give you other information for free. Now, regardless of which tool you use, one thing that I want you to understand, and this is very important when you're doing some keyword research, is that single word keywords tend to be really poor. Okay, so let me give you an example. Imagine, for argument's sake, that you have, I don't know, a car rental company, right? That is maybe has an office here in Ashland, Virginia, right? In a situation like that, right, if you want to optimize your website, you might consider using the word car as one of your keywords. Now, in general, this word by itself is usually a poor keyword, even though it has huge search volume, right? So if you look at the number of searches that involve the word car, you're going to be probably talking in the hundreds of millions or even billions of searches, right? So you might think, oh, that's a good keyword. Well, it's not. And the reason why is because when you are interested in buying a new car, you're going to use the car word. When you're interested in buying a used car, you will also use the car word. When you're interested in renting a car, you will also use the car word. But even worse, when you're interested in the movie Cars, you might actually use the car word, right? So no matter what you're up to, in all those cases, you're going to use similar or the same keyword. So because of that, that keyword tends to yield poor results. Like many of those users are going to use the same word when they are doing different things. So the chances that you will find people going to your site are a lot lower, because obviously all the people that are doing other things that are not related to what your business is about, they are going to just see the result and they are not going to click on it. So the quality of the leads you're going to get really varies depending on how specific and accurate your keyword is. So that means instead of having single keywords, you probably are going to want to have a long tail keyword. What does that mean? In the industry, a long tail is a keyword that has 4 or more words associated with it. And what that does is it makes typically the query a lot more specific. So the quality of the results you're going to get tends to be a lot higher. So for example, if you're a rental company in Ashland, Virginia, if you say rental car Ashland, Virginia, you're going to have a lot more accurate searches, right? The odds that you will find somebody that is interested in renting a car in your location are going to skyrocket if you compare with a simple search like car rental, which it might be many different locations, for example. And it's not only about location. You want to have more precise keywords because they're going to make your content more interesting to the users that are going to land there. And that means less bounces. That means people are happier. People are going to engage with your content more, and you're going to get better results. Okay. Now, let's say that you have come up with a solid list of keywords. Now what? Well, avoid keyword stuffing. Don't just have the website that you already had and throw in the keywords like they are some sort of miracle ingredient that are going to fix your website. That's not how it works. Okay, the way you want to do is you want to build the content in your website by using themes that are associated with the keywords that are high in your priority list, right? So what I'm suggesting essentially is that you build the website from the ground up and you start with the keywords, right? Now, these keywords are going to be, for the most part, used strategically. What do I mean by this? What I mean is you need to use them frequently, but you need to put them in the right places. First of all, the title tag. You always want to have at least one of your most important keywords towards the beginning of the title tag. Crawlers, when they are indexing pages, care about the position of the words, not only whether the words are there. And having one of your keywords early on your title tag makes your website a lot more likely to be ranked up than if it's towards the end of your title tag. Okay. What else? Websites have different levels of titles. You should try to sprinkle keywords throughout your titles because they are oftentimes more heavily weighted than the body content, right? And H1 titles carry a bigger weight than H2 titles, and H2 titles carry typically in an algorithm a bigger weight than H3. I think you get the picture, right? Also, when you're writing in the body of your site, instead of repeating the same word over and over again, which is not good writing, by the way, and customers are gonna, end users and visitors are gonna get bored with your site. Try to use synonyms instead. Say things slightly different, even though the themes, the underlying topics are going to be similar, right? Also, build unique, original content that customers care about. Content is king. If your keywords are on point, but your content's poor, nobody's going to want to go to your page. And when they get to your page, maybe by accident, everybody's going to leave as soon as possible. Okay, if you want to keep your customers engaged, you need to make sure that, yes, you build the content from those keywords, but the content needs to be fresh, needs to be relevant to the customer, and it needs to be specific enough, right? It cannot be generic content, otherwise they are not going to be there. You need to be essentially solving a problem for the customer, either an information problem or an engagement problem, where you're doing something that is basically entertainment for them. And because of that, they are going to go there. Otherwise, either an information problem, or lastly, if you have an e-commerce page, obviously you want to be providing products and services that the customer actually wants to acquire from you in this case. Okay. What other things do you need to do when you're building your page from these keywords? Consider having at least one or two of the keywords in bold. Okay. Search engine algorithms use different weights whether the text is in bold or not. It's basically making it particularly important within a page. Same thing, make sure that your URL has at least one, if not more, of your keywords in the URL itself. Okay. Also use meta description or meta tags, where some of these keywords are actually included. Now, this meta description is not going to be read by the users, but it will be read by the search crawlers that are going to be indexing your page. So it's going to affect the location, even though the users cannot see it. And then finally, your internal links between your main page, let's say, and any other pages within the website should also have in their URLs, in the internal links, they should also have some of the keywords. All those steps are going to increase the chances they are going to be higher and higher into the search algorithm and hence into the sales results. It's not only about the text. Also, if you have any other digital assets into your page, for example, if you have some images and or some video, it is important that you also optimize those images and video so that they increase the chances that you're going to rank high up within the search results. And to do that, you're going to want to use as many tricks of the trade as possible. One of those is to actually name the actual digital asset, for example, the image, with a file name that has some of the keywords. So if one of the keywords is car rental, you want to make sure that the image about maybe your car rental location has car rental location into the file name. Don't just name it 1245 picture, because that is not telling the crawler that that image is actually relevant. Now, it is true that the technology used by Google, for example, in the later days, can actually look at the content of the picture and based on that make some decisions about whether it's relevant or not itself. But you want to make the job of the indexing as easy as possible. So you want to help by using names of the files and also title attributes of the images and any other digital assets that are in conjunction with these keywords that we were mentioning. Same thing, any meta information associated with the image, and if you use any descriptive captions, make sure that they include either one of the keywords and or some synonyms if you're using too many of those across all these different categories that I'm mentioning. So we've talked about keywords, we've talked about content, we've talked a little bit about other digital assets. What about links? Now, links play a key role in most search engines, and what they are essentially doing is they are giving you external validation that the content that you're providing is actually trustworthy. The way it works is if your website is not trustworthy, other websites are not going to be pointing to your content because they don't consider it to be trustworthy. So usually when a large number of third-party sites connect to your site, it usually means that your content A is trustworthy and B, it's relevant. You have something in your site that other sites don't have. And because of that, a lot of sites connect to your site. So the number of external links pointing in your site's direction is going to be one of the important variables used by your search engine decision-making algorithm, basically. Okay. Now, third-party websites could link to your site and use a keyword nofollow, which will essentially be telling the crawling algorithm, or the crawling spider, I should say, that even though they are pointing at your site, they do not necessarily trust your content. And the latest version of Google seems to be following this nofollow path, but not every search engine uses this information at this point. So there might be some search engines that still bypass this nofollow statement, which is basically letting the crawler know that even if I'm pointing in somebody else's direction, I'm not sure that their content is trustworthy anyway. Right? So like I said, number of clicks matters, but it's not only the number of clicks, the quality of, links. The quality of the links matters as well. What do you mean by that? Well, if the websites that are pointing at you are really low content websites that have really high bounce rates and maybe are spamming users, what the algorithm does is it lowers the weight of those links. So it's basically the product between the number of links and the quality of those links. Another category used by the search engine to decide whether the links are valuable or not is whether they come for specific types of websites. In particular, government websites are weighted more heavily than non-government websites, assuming that they have some authority. And universities also are a category that is usually considered trustworthy. So if you have universities linking into some of your content, that's going to be sending a signal to the market that you're actually a trustworthy partner, and because of that, the quality of the links will be higher, and the chances that you will show up high in the search engine result page will be higher. Finally, before I stop talking about keywords and SEO, let me also mention that oftentimes you can learn about what's working and what's not by, instead of looking at the keyword searches, looking at your key competitors, see who comes up towards the top, and looking at what they are doing right now. So essentially what you can do is you can do reverse engineering of your competitors' digital efforts, right? And by doing that, you might be able to find out what kind of keywords they are probably using, maybe by looking at the meta tags, for example, and looking at, their titles, the URLs. Those are going to give you hints, because I already shared with you best practices in this regard, of what your competitors are up to, and you might be able to leverage that by maybe finding some ideas about what kind of keywords and what kind of placement of maybe keywords or synonyms of keywords will actually be helpful. Now, to look at further data, search engines are interested in providing high quality results to their users. So because of that, Google and Bing, they are going to be interested in following what the users are up to, just to make sure that what they are providing for them is actually relevant information. And the way they do this, it's by using cookies, right? So what Google is going to do is going to place a small text file in your hard drive of whatever machine you're using that basically tracks you over time. And it sees how many times you go to a certain website, maybe a website that you got from one of the queries that you did at the Google search engine, right? And that will be logged as such in the cookie. And it will tell the company how many times you go to that website, how frequently, like in a given week or unit of time, how much time you spend at that site, how many clicks you're doing different links that are on that site, etc., etc., etc. What this is essentially doing is looking at user behavior to really try to decipher whether the quality of the links that Google is providing are high or not. If they are high quality links, you're a lot more likely to A, spend more time on the site, B, engage with the site more. That means use the different features or options that are in the site. Let's say that maybe you can get a newsletter from the site and you will sign up for it, or maybe the website has some sort of widget that you can actually use, so you will just click on that, or by looking at other aspects like the number of times you click on that particular search result. If the answer is low, it means that it's maybe a low quality result, or by also looking at your bounce rate, which is basically how many times you go to that result and you just leave the site almost immediately. That will be considered a bounce. You need to make some sort of cut-off decision about how much time it goes by, but maybe after 3 or 4 seconds, if people leave the site, it means that that site was low quality from the perspective of the search engine. Now, another thing that they are going to want to see, other than that, especially Google is putting a lot of emphasis in this, is the speed at which the site loads. This is particularly important in countries maybe where broadband is not so commonplace, but Google has made maybe an executive decision across the board that it's going to be relevant regardless. And the speed at which your digital assets load plays a big role, especially because mobile has become now mainstream, and because of that, a lot of these digital assets that are slow, especially when you don't have 5G connections, Google is emphasizing this aspect to make sure that the user experience is as good as possible, and you need to make sure that your website is loading quickly and it's loading well in all platforms, not only the desktop, but also in mobile and maybe tablets as well. Finally, when it comes down to social media and its impact on search, I want you guys to realize that at the end of the day, the search engine, it's going to be looking not only at websites, but it's also going to be looking at social media platforms. So if your company has a Facebook page, an Instagram page, a YouTube account, etc., 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 those are probably prominently going to show up, if you're doing a good job, into searches that, for example, have your brand on them. So here you can see in this slide a quick search that I did this afternoon, where I was looking at a brand like Nike. And as you can see here, search results 4 here to 10, you can see the 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, and 10th are all social media platforms or accounts that Nike has. The first one was the Nike's website. You cannot see it here, unfortunately. I couldn't fit all the information and make it big enough for you to see anything. There were a couple of local searches of where you could get Nike products within my, let's say, local area. And then after that, we get into some of the social media profiles. So what this means essentially is, because remember, the top searches are the ones that are going to be selected the most. Having a lot of digital social media platforms that are run well are going to really help the brand be a lot more prominent towards the top, because you're going to essentially take more search share. What does that mean? More of your profiles, whether it is your website and or any other social media platform that you're maintaining at this time, are going to be shown prominently at the top, and that's going to minimize the chance that somebody else, for example, one of your competitors, will get the click-through with that search. So if you want to improve your SEO in general, having social media accounts is a very, very important aspect, and the more, the merrier. Finally, a word about mobile. At this point, the number of searches is larger already. In fact, it's been like that for a few years in mobile than it is in desktop or laptops, right? So the present and the future is mobile. Now, almost everything that I've said so far applies to mobile as well. So it's not like it's completely a different space, but there are a couple of issues that are more prominent or more pertinent when it comes down to mobile. So I want to mention them. Okay. First, the type of queries that you're going to get are slightly different, especially in the last couple of years. Now that we have larger language models, we are moving towards using voice above and beyond typing. Many times you're using your smartphone when maybe your hands are not available, for example, while driving. And because of that, a lot of searches are happening now using voice. Now, this changes picture a little bit because the kind of commands that are given via voice are a little bit different. They tend to be usually more questions than just keywords. And so this should maybe affect a little bit the list of keywords that you will use. Also, oftentimes in mobile, you're going to have capabilities that are not always used or not as frequently as in the desktop realm, right? Like, for example, a lot of people now are using their camera in their phone to take pictures and using image search-based queries, right? That's going to be very different, right? Or the same thing using scanning barcodes. So because of this, maybe there are slightly different considerations when it comes down to keyword searches, especially the nature that I described before when I was speaking particularly about questions. Okay, that's one thing. Another aspect of mobile is that it's usually easier for companies to pinpoint exactly where you are as opposed to maybe in the case of a desktop, although maybe with the IP address you can do that as well. Okay, and because of that, this enables a lot of local searches, okay, which makes maybe for certain things like e-commerce, for example, especially if you have a brick and mortar store, a lot more appealing for companies, for example, to advertise in a mobile environment. Because as people go by, you might be able to connect with them knowing where they are, given that almost all smartphones are GPS enabled, and even if they are not, companies can learn your location by looking at things like your Wi-Fi connection or what Wi-Fi's are within range, even if you're not connected. And local results are particularly interested in mobile. Okay? And it enables type of marketing that is maybe not so prevalent in the desktop space. Now, when it comes down to specific things to do for SEO in mobile, other than the considerations that I've mentioned so far, first and foremost, make sure that your website runs smoothly in a mobile environment. And that means trying both Android and iOS and checking and making sure that both run smoothly on your website. The way the website is coded is going to be paramount to this. You're going to need to get together with your IT department and make sure that you test all platforms, especially mobile, given that most searches come from here, and that your website runs smoothly with this. Also make sure that the crawlers can access all your mobile assets as much as they can, your non-mobile assets. Good. What else? Also, you may want to submit your website to mobile-friendly directories. There are some directories online that are going to enable you to register your website, claiming that it's particularly optimized for mobile. And if that's the case, if you put the time and effort on making your website mobile-friendly, you might as well let everybody know about it. And the search engines oftentimes will use this information to give you more brownie points and raise your search engine results if you're optimizing for mobile. And then finally, make sure that you have small images. Okay, remember that's going to help with the speed of loading, especially if you have slower connections, 3G, maybe also 4G. Okay, and you might want to include the word mobile in multiple places strategically, like I mentioned before, as one of your keywords that actually should be used in the design if you're trying to optimize for mobile.